Our next speaker is somebody I've had the privilege to get to know pretty well over the last few weeks. A serial entrepreneur, recently was the CEO of Lumi Mobile, which some of you may be familiar with, and now is the co-CEO of RealityMine. Please join me in welcoming Rolfe Swinton.
Thanks, Lenny. Cheers. Thank you. Good morning. I can say, if we go from the extremely macro view of what Nathan was just talking about, what I want to go down is really down to the very specifics about thinking about how do we measure individual behaviors and then be able to take that out further. And to think about this from a point of view, first of all, what we're doing is we're analyzing essentially consumer behavior. But I want to talk today about a problem which I think is probably something which touches all of us, which is really about how do we deal with the data and privacy around that. So I think there's a problem which doesn't just touch our business, I think it touches all of our businesses, and I wanted to flag that today as an issue for us to discuss over the next couple of days, and to put an idea on the table about how we can all unlock the full value of all this data we're trying to capture, how we can take, for example, the 6-odd billion data points that are people that Nathan's got in his database and more, and start to connect them together and make more from that. So, okay, so, sorry, this didn't show what's happened here. So, what I want you guys to think about, first of all, is just where things are going, and what can we start to do in terms of understanding consumer behavior. And if you think about, we all saw this movie, probably Minority Report. I just want to show you a clip, and think about what's actually happening in here, and how far are we from actually understanding the behavioral footprint of someone. They can treat this this clip from the film. So if you can.
A road diverges in the desert.
So you remember the main character is trying to escape people, and as he's walking along, advertising is aware of who he is. So that movie came out a few years ago. It seemed like, wow, this seems very far away. In fact, the kind of behavioral analytics that are going to drive that point in time link to advertising to people, in fact, is available here now. We're seeing products starting to come to market. For those of you who aren't familiar, Google Glass is just about ready to go. At least the prototypes are out and being used. And this is a wearable piece of eyewear. And through that, Google is able to layer information over the eyepiece and help you understand and navigate the world around you. So both giving you choices of things to select, telling you what the weather is outside, and obviously being able to deliver information. Of course, if you think from an individual basis, very useful, maybe slightly scary, but also from the data side, Google not only knows what you're searching for now, they know everything you're looking at, where you are and where you're doing that. So think about the implications of what you can do with that. You think also about what Amazon's doing now. Amazon is not very far behind them. Amazon is making all sorts of tools for you as a shopper to take with you wherever you go and use your phone as the most powerful, data collection and information advice, so that you go around and you can go and scan a barcode in a store and get pricing data. Or even, Amazon's being very clever. Let's get you to do research for us on pricing and how to be more competitive. So if you scan, they want you to encourage to do that. They're allowing you to scan something and see consumer feedback from Amazon in the store itself. So Amazon's getting incredibly rich detail about who you are, what you're looking for, and where you're doing that. And this is really where we're looking to play. We're actually, as a business, RealityMine is out to try to level the playing field in a way because we think that there's lots of other people that need the same kind of analytics that Google and Amazon are able to bring that into the world by leveraging mobile devices to do that. And our businesses come about, just for those of you who may be familiar with Lumi Mobile. It's a business that I co-founded a few years ago, focusing on really the use of mobile as an active research platform. And we saw the need to actually use mobile in a very different way, because essentially this thing we're carrying in our pockets is essentially a big tracking device with a bunch of sensors stuck into it. And that's really how we look at it. And it's how do we unlock the potential of this device to do just that. And with that, we've created a whole suite of tools which are really about how to make the most of this tracking/sensor we carry with us all the time. And so with this, if you think about what you're able to do, like what Google Glass is doing, we're able to understand where you are, We can understand what advertising you're seeing through your mobile device. We can understand what advertising you're being exposed to around you. We can hear television ads that you're being exposed to. We can understand what outdoor posters you've walked by. We can see what you're searching through from your phone. We can understand how you're using mobile applications in the context of where you're using them. Are you using a calculator when you're at the bank? Are you using Amazon's application when you're in my store? How are these things working? So you start to put these things together as a system, and you can overlay other things. So for example, we're working with a Boston-based company called Affectiva, which can do emotional analytics. So we're able to look at, when we see you're looking at an ad on your mobile device, how do you feel about that? How do you respond emotionally to what you're seeing? So there's layers and layers of data we can start to get, which really come down to the context. And I can bore you senseless with the microscopic granular detail that we can pull off a device. You don't really care about that. What you care about is how you use this stuff and how you can get to it regardless of the platform you're using. And whether you're putting our software on someone's phone or we're giving you some code to put into an application that you're running, that also doesn't really matter. But what it does matter is it's all of these different kinds of platforms that we're using where you can start to understand exactly who's doing what. But let's put that into some context. Let's think about the path to purchase and how is it that you get, really how do you understand and shape this path? Like if we go back to the film clip, what can we do to make these tools useful? So first of all, we can think about how do you just start to measure advertising ROI and mobile advertising ROI? You can start to see who's seeing what media, where, when, and how in the house. What are they looking through on their tablet? What are they watching on their TV? What are they watching on their mobile device? Just think now, for example, around the Olympics. It's the first time where there's really been multimodal media delivery. Who's going to watch what where? Right now, no one has a clue. No one has any idea what's going to be most popular. I'm looking forward to after it because we're actually going to have answers to those questions and seeing what advertising is playing out where and when. These start to become very important from a media planning point of view, from advertising. Actually, how are people really working with these things? Now, you can also start to think about seeing what ads people start to take action on. We were talking to one major packaged good company, and they said, we still don't know who sees an ad and where does it actually, how does it drive a path to purchase? We can start to measure that because we can see someone saw an ad, someone saw an offer, someone saw a brand. What's happening in terms of the weight of seeing that to them taking action? So then we can also start to get down to what's happening on the path to purchase itself. So we can see, what are people searching for? What are they looking for as they're out and about? What we do start to see is that actually people, when they're searching for things before they go into a store. So they're priming themselves for looking for information. When you go into the store itself, what starts to happen there? What's someone's mood when they go into the store? And we've been working with some other researchers who figured out that your mood will determine, this is probably many of you are already familiar with this kind of research, but your mood determines the kind of shopping trip you'll have and also the kinds of offers that you'll be aware to or you'll be open to. To give you a specific example, if you are stressed and feeling a little bit tight on cash, you want to get through your shopping trip as quickly as possible. If you're feeling a little bit flush, you've got some money, you're maybe planning for a party in a good mood, the longer shopping trip will be more typical for you. The offers that you can be delivered and the impact they have are also very different then, though. For the person who's feeling stressed, give them a coupon, very effective offer. For the person who's feeling a bit flush, if you give them a bundle offer, they'll respond much better to that. So understanding someone's emotional sentiment at that time, which we can do as we understand their path to purchase, and suddenly you can link a very different offer and take action. So you start to think about how you link these things together, and that's where the value of these tools comes. So you can understand how someone's moving through a store and what information exactly to deliver when you start to combine these different strands of data together. So you understand their behavioral footprint in a way which you can take action for as a retailer, as a manufacturer, as whomever. You can start getting into understanding exactly what people are doing on those applications, how are they using them, how are they working, how are they not working. And through all this, we start building piles and piles of behavioral data. We're currently running in about 15 countries, from the US to Indonesia and more. And through that, we're generating reams of data. And it's this data that I want to talk about a little bit more now. Because we're building this data up, actually the real value isn't just the stuff that we're capturing. When you start thinking about, just take the retailer perspective again, if you can start taking the data that we're building on a very microscopic level, what is a person doing? What's driving their behavior? But you start linking that to the CRM. What's this person's purchase history? What's the point of sale? What did they actually buy? What's in inventory? What's not in inventory? You start adding in active research. We can ask more specific questions and beyond. So there's a much richer picture there to capture about the person. And the value of that is pretty significant. is a very simple way to quantify what's the value of actually being able to merge that data. I'll just give you one example. This is some research that's been done recently by some UK academics in Switzerland, where they just had the ability, they overlaid people's location data to predict where you're going to be. And by being able to combine data, well, first of all, they built an algorithm, and they could predict within 1 kilometer accuracy at any time where you are going to be tomorrow. Pretty interesting already. But if they could combine data, if they could take your data and yours, that of your friend, suddenly the accuracy came down to 20 meters. So the power of accuracy about combining information is really important. And this is where the opportunity is, because I believe the currency of the future, what we're building, this is how we're going to help Nathan actually have a reason to pay those people 50 rupees, is this is where the currency is. But so what we have to do, though, is make this data liquid, or else we're going to have a problem. And I'll give you an example about where data liquidity is a problem if you don't get it right. And this comes back to getting the right opt-ins. Netflix was running a big competition. They took all their data, they thought they anonymized it properly, they put it in the web, and they said, developers, come to us. If you can help us come up with a better algorithm to process our data, we're going to give you $1 million check if you can get better recommendations. The problem is the lawyers were already out looking at this. They found that, in fact, the way the data was presented was actually in violation of Netflix's own privacy policy, and they had to stop the competition or stop it going forward. And this, to me, is exactly the problem with having illiquid data, with not locking up the value. And we've done a lot of discussions with companies saying, how good are you at actually managing your data? How good are you at actually managing what rights you have, what opt-ins you've got linked to that data? And I ask you to go through this list yourselves. And certainly, I won't name any names because this would get you into legal problems. But a lot of very significant companies go through this list and actually can answer yes to these questions. And this is the heart of a problem, which does need to get fixed. Coupled with, as we've rolled out projects around the world, our clients think, oh, sure, it's no problem. You can just start rolling out your service in South Korea. You can start rolling this out in India. And we find out, well, actually, in South Korea, if you want to capture location data, you have to register with the government twice a year. Only those windows, and otherwise you can't. Or if you're going to do a mass SMS in India, it's actually in breach of spamming law. And what typical response has been saying, well, actually, just don't worry about this. Ignore it, eventually it'll be a problem. I actually think that that's not the right solution, in the long term, obviously. So how is it that we get around this? I think the other side is, what are consumers actually thinking about? What do they know? What are they sharing? The Wall Street Journal has done some great work analyzing this. In fact, if we look at what, for example, Pandora is taking out of their application, there's a huge amount of data, and consumers are not really aware about where their data is going to. From taking my phone ID and passing it on to third parties, not transparent. Facebook takes even more data out of it. So we can go through all the microscopic bits of data that is getting shared out with different players, different apps within Facebook. I think if the average consumer actually appreciated this, they would actually be quite surprised. But especially when they think about what this data is worth. You can go through and calculate your value to Facebook. If I put in my data, apparently I'm worth $1,235. I'd like to be able to get Jana to pay me that money in some way, some exchange. That'd be a pretty good deal. But consumers don't understand that yet. But they do appreciate that if you're not paying for something, you're probably the product being sold. And that, I think, is something which people are going to start to appreciate more and more. In our own business, with RealityMine, we're paying consumers somewhere between $1 to $20 a month to motivate them to give up their data from their mobile device. And with that, we're getting really high opt-in rates. We managed to get about 100% opt-in rates. But this, again, I think can change quickly as people start to wonder about, what's this a value exchange? Is this fair? There's been some work done on what do people value the privacy for. And interestingly, the number isn't actually all that different than what we're paying people. This is new research that I've seen. But I think also interesting is that there's this growing gap. Okay, academic use versus commercial use. Now, how is this going to change? When I think people start to become aware of this gap, am I giving up something for free or for very little, and I know that it actually is worth this much? What do I actually really want for that? And when you look at what people are saying, there's certainly a growing trend around the issue around privacy and how I protect my data. People are becoming more and more concerned about this and are stopping their behaviors as a result in some cases. Couple that with the biggest threat for all of us capturing data around non-compliance, because the corporate governance issue can't be ignored. Even you look at, for example, now the EU is threatening a 2% of turnover penalty for breaches around consumer data protection. That is an enormous penalty. And so all these pieces together suggest that we need to do something different. And I think that's where all of us can actually unlock the data we're capturing and make it more liquid at the same time, ensure that we're actually protecting consumers. So what we're proposing is a way around how do we manage consumer opt-in in a much more structured way that can actually work across a whole bunch of different services. And we're developing a solution we're calling the Universal Privacy Register. And the idea is very simple. In fact, the way is how do you create a global system for managing privacy and legal compliance? How can we get tools which can be plugged into any kind of data collection service? A really simple thing which consumers can understand, visual opt-ins, instead of making complicated. So whether you're literate or illiterate, you actually understand what you're giving up. And more importantly, be able to link this back into a database that can be managed so you actually can be sure that if you're spending a pile of market research through a pile of different companies and they're using a pile more suppliers, you can actually be certain that all that data you're getting from all those places can be come together, actually be unified and used. Because if you can do that, not only can you make sure that you're understanding what's going on in the market, but you can actually start doing that to actually help power your own marketing initiatives. And that system, even though I know it's breaking the wall between church and state, is happening. Google and Amazon are doing that, and if you don't do that, you're missing out on an enormous opportunity on how to take your business forward. From a consumer point of view, this starts to become really simple, because if I have a very simple way to opt in and I have a very simple way to access and manage what I'm opting into, doesn't that make my life a lot easier? And if you're in Europe, as a business capturing data, you're going to have to do this anyways, because consumers can ask for your data, and 14 days from that time they ask, they need to be able to get all of it. You have to send it all to them. So you better start managing this now, or else they're going to have it managing it for you. And the different ways that we think about how do you manage it, how do you make it really simple and intuitive to actually learn also what people's preferences are, what drives it, how do you make that intuitive is only going to make it easier. When it comes to actually how do you architect a database, then it comes down to how do you really manage rights and decision rights around that. And the steps for rolling this out, well, we can talk about this more in Q&A time and with people offline. But there's an idea about how do we help organize, first of all, the global's privacy rules. How do we make registration and certification simple so that we can all operate within a framework where we know the data we're getting is really going to be as valuable as possible for the long term. And from a point of view of business, why use this? Essentially, this is really about reducing the cost of business and ultimately creating a bigger asset for all of us in what we're doing here. So here's a call to action. If any of you are actually interested in getting involved in this initiative, it's really simple. We have a very simple suggestion, which is if you want to help get involved in creating the initial database, you're going to get free rights to use it. It's that simple. Because we think this should be a collaborative project. And the more of us that help sort out all the complexities of dealing with privacy and consumer-related data protection is really important. And so in doing that, we're going to create an asset that we can all use. So with that, we hope that over the course of the next couple of days, we're going to learn lots more about how to evaluate consumer behavior. I hope we've given you some ideas about what you can do through the location and data collection devices that we're using, and think about how you can use this across the whole spectrum and make sure that you're structuring your data in a way and capturing the right opt-ins that you're going to be able to really exploit this data asset and really make data the currency that it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rolfe. So questions for Rolfe?
I do some privacy and data protection consulting, among some other things, and particularly some of the markets, like you cited, the UK, are particularly problematic. I want to ask you about, seems to be a disconnect between the practitioners and the regulators, even.
Yes.
I see in some of the work I'm doing when you start going into social media, where you look at like the MRS is very clear on you can't do any of the social media research stuff. And I said, well, look at all the providers of sentiment analysis. And you find that most of them have headquarters in New York and their second largest office are in London. What are they doing in London? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think those people are practicing like not worrying about it. And what's going underneath is the fact that, businesses in the UK are using this stuff. There's going to be quite a collision when this really comes where we're going to start penalizing you. Can you talk about that, what you've seen?
Well, that goes back to my point. That sort of list of questions, and are you actually compliant? Most people are like, no, and their strategy I've seen so far is ignore it and worry about the future. But for me, that's the point, which is that if we look at if people are spending $50 billion a year in market research services globally, that actually if they get this policy, if they get the structure in place, you can actually start leveraging that, turning that into a real asset, which is a durable asset rather than just it's a consumable. And if you think about more broadly, if we're spending $600 billion globally on marketing, And actually, all of that, if we actually can start to associate those two things together, then you create an asset. The current strategy is basically treat it as a consumable. I spend some money, I learn something, and that's it. And that's where I think the problem is. And so you're quite right. Whether if any of these things, by sort of taking an approach that we're not really going to worry about it right now, and the regulators will someday do something, will act then, I think it's missing a significant opportunity. And also, I think if the regulators are going to act unless we act, and we all know that. So one blessing of the market research industry, we've been able to sort of fly under the regulatory radar for most of the time, but we may well get caught in that.
More questions? And just a reminder, we are simulcasting this entire event to multiple folks internationally, so please hold your questions till you have a mic so the people on the simulcast can hear. More questions? Yeah, Mark.
This appears to be a private venture to manage privacy across multiple platforms. I'm just curious, have you reached out to any trade associations to engage them in this effort as well?
Yeah, it's this venture as such. It's not yet domiciled, and it needs to be. And I think that the trade associations are working with them is a very logical thing. This is really something. Part of the point of presenting this today is that this is a problem we've been seeing in our own business and talking to many other people, seeing it coming up. It could well be the most logical thing is it stands as a as a nonprofit freestanding enterprise that links to trade associations. So I think it's a great question and an important suggestion.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Over here, the short one.
David.
You said something in a passing remark which I thought was very interesting, which you suggested was that consumers, once they recognized the fact that their data was being measured or valuable, appeared to be changing in their behavior. I wonder if you could just expand upon that, since it's a phenomenon research has always been troubled by.
I'm not sure. From what we're not trying to directly change people's behavior. We certainly are using, in ways, the ultimate use of our technology is around being able to actually apply so that you can use the understanding of the behavior in real time to help modify the behavior. I think what I was saying in terms of payment, what I do believe is that people's behavior, attitude to what they're going to expect in terms of value exchange for the data is changing. I think you're starting to see people becoming more sensitive to it. So I think that in terms of compensation, I think that equation is going to be is likely to change from what we're seeing. Does that answer your question, or?
For now, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Well, and I would even add in that whole process is in effect now, no matter what. Right. So whether we do it or somebody else does, it's going. Yes.
Hi, Nick from Kantar. Hey, Rolfe.
Hey, Nick.
Great presentation. So what do we do about Apple and the recent decision to pull metering, even opt-in, double opt-in metering from the platform? I'm sure everybody in this room would like to have opt-in metering be something that Apple's cool with. What do you think we should do as a group? I mean, the people in this room probably represent significant power of interest in the research space to potentially influence them in a positive way. What do you think we should do?
It's a great question. So to give everyone context about Nick's question, as you know, the greatest challenge in doing the kind of work that we're doing with RealityMine and putting some software on people's phones is, putting software on a phone isn't very hard. We do it all the time. The hard part is there's one company which deems that it wants to have a completely walled garden around a pretty substantial platform, that being Apple. And Apple made the summary godlike decision of suddenly we're going to take a certain classification of applications just off the App Store without any warning, without any word. Suddenly, poof, overnight, a bunch of applications vanished, including one of ours, and that of people like Arbitron and ComScore and a bunch of other people. And Apple, of course, will say nothing about why, but it's clear that their strategy has been one of, over the last year or two, slowly removing bit by bit anyone's access to what's actually going on with the Apple ecosystem and not wanting to share any of that data. And so with that, I think Nick raises a really important question and something which I'd suggest here. So what Nick is really asking is, what can we do as an organization of people who have a really strong interest in actually being able to access that platform to understand consumer behavior? And I think that for one action I think that we should take collectively, I think it's a very simple action, which is actually be able to go to Apple and speak with one voice and not only our voice, but more importantly, the voice of all the brands and all the people who are spending that 600 or 700 odd billion dollars a year on marketing, from which Apple wants to be taking a slice of that. That's the voice that we need to speak with, and it better be a clear and single-minded voice saying, look, Apple, you're a media platform. You need to be sharing your data in a way which we can validate as a third party, because that's how this game works. But we better figure out how to take a very big lever and speak with a very, very clear and unified voice, or else Apple will definitely say no, and even then it's going to be hard for them to open up. But I think we better do that, and better do it sooner than later, in fact, or else it's going to be very comfortable saying, look, well, we did this and no action was taken. So, yes, great question, Nick.
Well, again, good news for our friends at Google that are sponsoring this event.
That's right, yes.
Any more questions for Rolfe? Nope. All right, thank you guys very much.